that's essentially what I do whenever
Okay.
I know the interwebs are sending it out. It does look like we're live now, and
Okay.
we've got some folks coming in. It's nice to see y'all. Good Friday afternoon. Um, it's I was just telling Paulette. We'll just chat for a second while folks come in. I was just telling Paulette that it's been a busy news month in my other publication in the publishing spectrum. There's been a lot of data announcements, and I did not know ahead of time, Scout's honor, I did not know that there would be this many announcements around data in Data Publishing Month over in my other publication. But it is very lovely. I was telling her that even I need a break from data. I need to step into the space of what it takes to get the story out. That's very juicy and really, really fun. And I really appreciate your work, Paulette. And when we were kind of chatting offline a couple months ago, you mentioned this idea of how you talk to your ancestors when you're writing. And so that's the premise of today. If you're tuning in, Paulette and I are going to talk about our writing practices and kind of how we approach writing. And a little while into our chat, she's going to share a practice that I told her, I was like, don't tell me what it is. I just want you to tell me about it live. And so we're going to just experience it together, folks. But yeah, why don't we start, like, Paulette, tell folks what you do, and then I'll kind of explain how the co-writing studio is a little different from the publishing spectrum while folks just saunter in.
Okay. Well, I write on Substack. It's because life is messy. And I have a background in yoga, in tantric yoga, meditation. I've taught yoga and meditation, and I'm a life coach. So I've done a lot of things in the years that I've been on this planet, and I'm really grateful for them. And right now I am in the process of writing my second manuscript. The first one was called The Breakaway Girl, probably 8 years ago, Secrets of a Tantric Yogi. And so now I'm looking at the premise of the book. I have a working title, but I don't know what the title is. But the premise is looking at 3 generations, what we inherit. And from my grandmother, who was an Italian immigrant, to my mother, first generation Italian American, and to myself, and what that cost them and what they gained and what it costs us and what we gain, and then who we become because of our lineage, because of our ancestry. So I'm kind of in the middle of that right now, and it's exciting and fun, and it's also a little, some days, overwhelming.
Yeah. And when you say cost us, like what medium are you measuring there, or what mediums are you measuring? Like when you say like what it cost, like your lineage?
Well, one thing that's really top of my mind is that I visited Italy several times, and it just really hurt my heart that I was not taught the language. And I wasn't taught the language because my grandparents wanted to assimilate. And so we're American, we don't speak Italian in this household. Now, my mother grew up with speaking Italian, but even as she got older, she lost that, and then we lost it. And that's huge, to lose a language. And what comes with that cost, to not have the richness of the language and the way, just, how it trickles down. So I think about that, like, what did it cost my grandparents to come here, just emotionally, intellectually, physically, and what did they gain from it?
Yeah.
And how that filters through us all.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing to reflect on, because I don't know, as I get older, I have a daughter now, she's 4 years old. I think about how much about like the culture of what I was raised in really helps me orient to how I understand what she's going through now. Even though I've gone, I've certainly espoused different sort of religious and political sort of persuasions, there's still a cultural sort of organizing force that I sense in myself. I can't imagine leaving that. Actually, I know what it felt like to leave it for a few years in Colorado, and knowing how comforting it is to be back in a place where I even recognize the smell of the land. Like I recognize the smell
Mm.
of Texas. I would imagine, I'm just curious, like, what does it feel like for an immigrant to leave the earth of their home? So anyways, I'm interested in that, and you're writing that and exploring that. I'm sure there's lots of, yeah, lots of layers, but I'm definitely intrigued about that, that cost.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so you're working on that book. I've invited you today to talk to us about like an interesting practice. I hinted at that a couple minutes ago. Um, I think it's. I'm feeling like I want to share about like what I'm trying to do here, because I think there's a really common experience on Substack where folks come in and they start one publication and then they think, do I need to start a second one? And most of the time I would advise them no, just because until you get your feet really firm in a lot of the mechanisms. And I feel like it could be helpful to just talk briefly about like why I have two and what I'm trying to do here. Like, why is
Mhm.
this space sort of created separately? Because people tend to cross, in tarot spaces, they call them cross watchers, right? like people tend to cross over between the spaces. And the co-writing studio has been an evolving project for me. And I've been so grateful to meet people like you in what I write and what I share on Substack, because the work of like bringing your work into the world can never be simplified down to like there's a strategy, there's a plan, you execute it, and then you walk away. Like in my experience, I've never seen a really vibrant publication that just runs on autopilot. Like your whole self, creative self, comes into this work. Um, and I kept finding that I knew that there were projects that needed to be set aside and have a place where this sort of inner writer, we were talking about this before, that like my inner writer is reminded I speak here too. I'm not just guiding other people. So I've literally named it the co-writing studio so that I remember every time I open it up, Amanda's here to write too. Like it's not
Mhm.
just I'm writing in service of someone else. Like I'm writing to me and sharing what I know and what I'm uncovering. And part of why I wanted to talk to you today is because there's just been, I think, a series of really untraditional doors that opened up. And I find a lot of them tend to be rooted in the body. They tend to be rooted in um, body practices. So I'm super interested about the connection of your work in tantric yoga and then like how that translates into your writing. And I'm just really eager. I'm an eager student because I've been a lifelong sort of editor, and now I'm a publishing advisor where I work on the big picture structures. But I have a book too, y'all. I have a book too, and it's outside what everybody probably already knows me for, but it has to have a space. Like I really affirm people who, you might have been an accountant for 30 years, but if you have that book you need to write, you must write it. You must find a way to bring it into the world. And that's how I feel about this space is, nobody knows about my poetry. Nobody knows about my spiritual path. And there has to be a place for that. And I hope this is a place of permission, to watch someone get crickets. I get crickets on my poetry. That's okay. The point is that it comes into the world and it comes out of me and it makes space for something else, that needs to be written next. And so, yeah, so I hope that this is a place where folks can come in and find like the wiggle room. Like I don't believe that stories are outside us. I think stories are inside us, right? But we can be confused about how to access them. I don't know if you ever feel that way, Paulette, if you can just like sense it, but you're like, where is it at?
Yeah, for sure. And when I was writing my first book, The Breakaway Girl, I was in a writing group, and I really loved the gentleman who facilitated it. And I used to say to him, I felt like I needed a title because I wanted some structure, like a container for these words that were coming out.
Mhm.
And I just kept I was like super focused on a title. And he said to me, Paulette, just keep writing. The book will tell you what the title is. And I thought, well, that's even a little woo woo for me. And I'm like, okay, but I kept talking to it. So this could kind of lead into some of the alternative type of practices that you're talking about, these doors, these portals that open. I kept talking to the book. And, what is it you have to say? What is it that you want me to say? And one day my husband and I were hiking, and I was talking through something that I was kind of stuck on in the book. And I blurted, I'm not a black sheep of the family. I'm a breakaway girl. And I said, okay, the book. And I was so like blown away by that, but also really validated that there is this transmission that you have with your work. You talked about being this inner writer and allowing the poetry and the stories to come through. And I think there is a connection with that. And how we do it. And it reminds me also that when I first started on Substack, I was still teaching quite a bit of yoga, and then I stopped teaching yoga, and I was so resistant. Like, I'm no longer a yoga teacher. I did that. That was my past. I want to be a writer. I want to claim this space, And after a while, I realized the yoga is a lifestyle. It's in my DNA at this point after 30 years of teaching and being a student, and I can't separate the two. And so somehow, what I'm hearing you say, Amanda, is somehow I had to learn how to be in communion with them both. And have the writing, whatever is going to show up that day, is it going to lean more towards the philosophy of yoga? Is it going to lean more towards my everyday life? The writing process, recently I've been writing about a prompt that I was given about writing to writing, which was like, what? And so, there's this dance that we're doing all the time. And what ways can we access that part of ourselves?
Yeah, I feel like there's like this metaphorical backpack that every writer has in their back, that like they're like, I found a treasure that helps unlock something. I'm going to put it in my backpack, and like over time you figure out what wiggles you free. We were chatting a little bit about this, that like, well, in writing there's certainly no shortage of purity tests, on like, what does a real writer mean? And obviously we've got big questions right now about, implications of AI, and what does thought mean? What does original thought mean? where does it, we have a lot of big questions on our plates right now. But I think about the rules for writing. It's curious. The rules for writing helped me become a really good editor. But when I wanted to become a writer, I had to create a space in my mind and my creative practice where I rendered them powerless, because they were so strongly embedded in me that I knew that there was some depth I couldn't access. And so over time, my backpack of writer tools and writer treasures, it looks a little different. It's a little lumpy. It still surprises me sometimes. And so, yeah, I guess if there's anything anybody takes from our chat today, it's that the more permission you can give to your process and not judge it, especially if you're neurodivergent. We were chatting about this. Once I started using audio notes to capture like fresh thoughts, certainly I still use my handwriting, but once I started using audio to just freeform write, I started writing 1,000-word essays just in an audio note, like almost with light editing. And it was shocking to me that like that medium was so strong, when I had been forcing myself to, well, you're not a real writer if you don't write morning pages by hand every day. But that energy, I think of it more of like as like energy. Like, where does that energy need to go, and what's the easiest spout to get it out. Like you were saying on your walk, all of a sudden it just kind of, it felt, as you were talking, I was like, oh, it feels like a geyser coming through Paulette right now. Like you just knew it. You just knew this was kind of the completion of it. So let me create a scenario, my friend Paulette. My book is loosely sort of structured around the idea of spiritual resuscitation. So what does it look like to have spiritual rupture, and then the surprising places where I can look back now and see that spirit was likely trying to revive me into something. I don't know if more authentic is, it feels a little cheesy, but it wasn't a return to what I was raised in. It was more of a resuscitation to something truer. But that includes my whole life. And I think this is why I was interested in what you talked about with how you kind of listen to your ancestors. What would it look like if someone was writing something similar to me? I think it's closest to spiritual memoir. What does that practice look like that you do? I'm curious to see if what would it feel like to try it on?
Well, I love that you're saying, that there's other modes like audio and that. And the one thing, my practice shifts and changes. And so it isn't, I don't get up every day and do morning pages. I don't do that. Some days I do write. I set a timer, maybe 15 minutes. Sometimes I have a prompt. Sometimes I don't. I do meditate regularly, and I want to say this. I think somebody wrote a note about this recently, that does it make me a good meditator? If I don't meditate, I just feel scattered and not so grounded in my own beingness. Talk about somatics. Like I tend to go up and out. And so even though I'm a yoga practitioner, I need something to ground me. And it may seem counterintuitive, but meditating helps me do that. And I just let myself wander. If the thoughts wander, I do some breath work. That I'm pretty regular, very consistent on. But some days I'll go for a walk. Some days I'll just ask the question and throw it out. Some days I'll ask the question in meditation. I built a labyrinth in my backyard. I walk the labyrinth. I chant. And so I'll tell you a specific that I've done. So I knew my grandmother, but not very well. And so I'm writing about these generations. And two things that I do. Sometimes when I sit in meditation, I imagine, and this is an exercise we could do, but I'm kind of sharing it ahead of time now. But I was privileged to have a close relationship with my mother. Not everybody does. So let's frame it like that. And so I feel very blessed for that. So I get calm, I do my thing, and I sit there and I bring myself back to a space that my mother and I shared at her kitchen, one of her kitchen tables later in life, where I would go and visit her, and we would drink coffee, and often she would bake her Italian biscotti, and we'd sip coffee and we'd eat biscottis, and we'd have conversation. And I go there in my meditation and I ask her, what is it what do you want me to say? What story do you want me to tell? What do you want this book? Are you talking to grandma up there? What is the through line that, is important that comes through? How can I do this justice? So I talk to her and I see us sitting there, I have this whole visual thing.
Yeah.
And then I let it go. I let it go and I'll try to come up, do my whatever, go for the walk or whatever, and see. Some days it comes right away, some days nothing, or maybe a day or two later, where an image will come up, a piece of a conversation, a line she said. So that's one thing that I do on a regular basis. And then I just have to share this with you because you mentioned tarot.
Yes.
I don't speak Italian. I don't know if we said this before or not. And that was one of the things that I feel like was lost.
Yeah.
So I don't read tarot, but I had friends who did, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to buy an Italian tarot deck, and I'm going to pull cards to see if I can make a connection with that lineage. Because tarot actually, I learned, originated in Italy. One of the stories is that it originated in Italy.
Oh,
So I bought these cards.
oh,
Let me put it that way. The artwork is beautiful. I bought a couple now.
yes,
And
yes.
there's words on the bottom. And sometimes I just ask the question, what could help me move forward in this story? Or I'm stuck here, or help me figure something out, or just what do you want me to play with today? And I'll pick a card. And I really don't know the right, what do you call them? Drawings. I don't know how to
Yeah, I
threads.
think each one has like their own sort of style of how they read and pull from different decks. I'm super new, but I'm interested in the storytelling aspect because I feel like they're working with energy in a curious way that helps story come through. And what an interesting thing. So if I were to try this, I don't have a deck, but I'd love to just imagine. I do have animal cards, so I do animal
Mm-hmm.
readings.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel really close to the animal kingdom. But if I were to want to just rest my mind and try to just sense what she would want, if I wanted to ask my grandmother a question, then I would pull a card from the deck to see if there's any connection that I sense from that question.
Yeah. Yeah,
Interesting.
definitely.
Interesting.
And then be open to it. Try not to go immediately in your head, but just welcome it in. And like I said, sometimes there's a clear some like this morning, and I'll share this. This morning I was meditating, and I really wasn't even I was thinking about something else. A thought came in, and tantra meditation is very forgiving. It's not like silence the thoughts. Try to. There are different types that you can do,
Yes.
but for the most part, energy, it's the Shakti. So whatever's coming through is part of the divine.
Yep.
Just pay attention to what's showing up. So
Yep.
something showed up, and I had this remembrance. I think partly because I built this foundation now of sitting at the table with my mother in my mind, where I was sitting with my mother, and she asked me, and this is many years ago, "Are you any good at it?" And I'm like, "Am I any good at what?" And she said, "Are you any good at that yoga that you do?" And
Oh.
and I said, "You mean like the poses?" And she said, "Yeah." And I like, "Well, some poses I'm pretty okay with. I never think about it as good or bad, but I
Mhm.
do struggle because I'm kind of tight on this one thing and I'm a little crooked." And she said, "That's the way you were born. You were born breech." And I was like, whoa. So we went off on this conversation. But what came today with having that remembrance is that could be in the book. That conversation somehow can be threaded in the book about what we carry, on a physical level.
Mhm.
And so that's just an example.
That would be really interesting to research too. Like, I would imagine there's also religious traditions that have different interpretations of what it means to be born in certain in direction. That would be really interesting research for a book too. What a juicy little paragraph that could make that people could learn about the symbolism. I'm very interested in symbolism and like across different religions, like how we interpret it, because it all still seems to be threaded together, but how they kind of hold it in the community is really fascinating to me. So
Oh my gosh, I love that. I never even thought about that.
yeah, yeah,
Yes. Like,
I would.
yes,
What
that's
a
so cool, Amanda.
what an interesting part of the book it would make. So I'm curious. So I've never actually. ask someone to pull a card for me, but I'm wondering, would you be interested? Do you, let me ask first, are you familiar enough with the cards? I'm still a student of animal medicine cards, so I probably would not say, let me do a spontaneous one because I'm still learning. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what would it be like? This might be interesting. I didn't have this planned, y'all.
No,
If
my
we just
goodness.
pull a card, we can see what intention could we settle in on.
Okay.
Um,
I'd love to. And actually, I have a dear friend who just she and her husband just moved to Prague, and I'm like, oh, I wish Katrina were here. She'd be so good at this. So I have a handbook. I might cheat and use the handbook to see, but let me just mix these up. So think about your question.
okay. Okay. Oh,
Okay.
this is okay, y'all. I didn't plan this. We talked about practices to open up your writing, and I've never done this. So we're just gonna do this on the spot. I told Paulette I basically felt completely blocked from creating an outline for our discussion, and I took that as a message because I'm a pretty much an outliner for all things. And so when the outline eludes me, I trust. I trust.
Okay.
So let's see. I wonder if we could just ask for just guidance for the collective on like what is the nature of what do we need to understand about the nature of like voice in our writing and our work? Like do the cards have any guidance of like where we're at right now? Is that a good enough? Is that broad enough? Because I don't know if I want to make it specific about me, but that's a thread in my work right now is what does it mean to have the voice you were given, not the voice that you're expected to have.
Okay. What does it mean? What does it mean to have the voice that you were given, not the voice that you were expected to have? Okay, this is how I do it. I just pull from the top.
Yep.
And I have been doing a little bit of, just dabbling in. So I'm not very concerned about if it's upright or reversed. I
Sure.
think everything has energy around it.
Interesting.
So, okay, so let's pull it. Troublemaking. Okay. Competition. Oh, interesting.
Huh.
So I'm going to put this up. That's what the card
Okay.
looks like.
Okay.
Okay.
Troublemaking.
Troublemaking. I have to put my glasses on. So, troublemaking.
I'm gonna write that word down.
Yeah. So this is about our voice, and
So we asked for a message about the voice that you're born with versus the one
mm-hmm,
that the world says you're supposed to give.
yeah. And the meaning here is conflict and competition are necessary to keep moving forward. Conflict and competition are necessary to keep moving forward. So I take it to mean that it's what you were saying earlier, I think even before we were on, that sometimes you have this inner tension happening between the data expert and the inner writer who is longing and being called to come forward. And sometimes they feel like they're in competition with one another, but
Mm.
I don't really think that they are. I think that it's a sort of like an inner troublemaking, like like
Hmm.
our voice. So let's think about it too. I made this personal to you, but to all of us. We have these expectations. Like I was saying, I don't want to be a yoga teacher anymore. But how can I separate myself from this voice that I've had for 30 years or, whoever else? I'm trying to see who is on here. Okay, so I recognize Chris Stanton, who I haven't been in conversation with in a really long time. And when I think about Chris, he is satirist, he's humorous, his voice is one of taking, sometimes maybe it seems light on the surface, but if you really read into his work, his voice has more of a cultural understanding of what's happening. So I see that, I'm hoping that that is, I think if I'm remembering right, there was another career back here, and how he's showing up now is this voice. And maybe there was an inner conflict. Maybe we all have this sort of inner uh, troublemaking that we have to go through to allow this voice to come forward.
It when you started, that's really great. That's super interesting. Like, because the card is almost saying that it's like productive.
Yes,
That
totally.
that that the and so my brain wants to go, what's the opposite of what would be unproductive, would be assuming it all has to be locked away as one or the other, and that they can't coexist. At least that's, wow, that's super interesting to think about. I'm really interested to see in the replay if folks resonate with this, because I don't think I've met a person that doesn't have some part of them that they're afraid to bring onto the page or bring into their publication. And I just think it's universal. I think there's who belongs, what part of you belongs forward and which one belongs in the background. So super interesting. Well, thank you, cards, for telling us this is good. It's making good trouble. This sounds what it sounds like. That was the message.
If I could add something. So there's a word in Sanskrit called, so this is the yoga. I can't not. So there's a word in Sanskrit that is swagatam. And one of the translations is welcome yourself. And so the idea is that we are to welcome all those parts of ourselves,
Mhm.
that there's some parts that we're not as welcoming to, we don't want to see it, or we push it away. You could say it's your shadow side or whatever, but we're here to welcome all those parts of ourselves. So there's an integration that happens, that there's an inner alignment that happens. So even at my age, I'm learning, well, how could I fully show up and who I am? And that may look different.
Isn't it such an interesting impulse, though, that I find universal, that like there's this like, well, I see like doors rapidly opening and closing. It's like, well, this one's allowed, this one's not. This one's allowed, this like tidy yourself up before you show up. And what exhausting work. What an exhausting task. But how many of us, are coming to the page like that? I mean, I certainly have, doors that are opening and shutting when I'm sitting down to write. And when I try to deeply relax with just whatever weird thing is going to come forward, no matter how weird it feels, often the weirdest stuff is sometimes the most, I don't want to say compelling because that feels a little self-congratulatory, but as an editor, I go, oh, I can work with that. Like, I can work with that. I just had to let the weird kind of come through for a while. And I think that's what's great about these kind of practices, is like, how do you soften and relax enough to even let it come onto the page? And I don't know, I like that. It's good trouble. It's good trouble to be wrestling, because it means that you haven't permanently closed the door on one side of yourself. So I don't know, what do you think? What are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm curious if anybody in the chat, if there's any question or anything that somebody wants to add to any of this, to please put it in there. I agree. I mean, I mentioned that I had this prompt from Maria Hornbacher about to write to Dear Writing, and so last week I wrote this sort of preemptive Dear Writing, and this week I might, like I said, I was going to show my letter. I was going to write my letter and I was going to post it. And I could feel like a little anxiety, like, oh, that's showing too much of my heart. That's showing that's a little bit too vulnerable. That's a little too much of a peek inside. So then I had to go through this sort of dance, this inner working that was going on. Like, is it though? How am I sharing something that is inappropriate? Not really. It's just in the name of my publication, because life is messy. It's just the mess.
It is just a mess.
I'm just writing about the mess. And so I think that we're always having that, a little bit of that. And then sometimes we don't. And then sometimes it just like comes out on the page and you go, okay, I'm okay with this. And
Yeah.
there it is.
Well, I feel like we've pulled out some really fun like tools that I can summarize at the end. Are there any? I was going to ask you. Wait, so we have your tarot deck. Are there any like writing prompts that you return to? Are there any books that you like, or like some of your go tos to like help kind of wiggle things open?
Hmm. Um, I have a list of prompts. I can't think that of one off the top of my head. Um, Sometimes I learned this from a poet, Lori Wagner, and she says she has a couple that are amazing, and she'll say, how does she say it? There's some things I don't want to write about. There's some things I don't want to write about. And then you just kind of, you could list them, or um, what's today? It's Friday. It's Friday. And then just, whatever, just write down a lot of things.
Mhm.
And what else might she say? Hmm. I try to read, because I'm working on my memoir now again. I try to read memoir. I just read Susan Orlean's memoir, Joyride. I thought she had there's a woman. Oh my gosh, she has some prompts. I can maybe text it to you later and you can put it in the show notes, because I don't remember her. Emily Rapp.
Okay.
Emily Rapp, and the title of her book is "I Would Die If I Were You." I've not read the book, but
Title.
yes, yes, and
Wow.
she talks about. Um, she was a guest on the podcast Memoir Nation, and I believe it's
Okay.
Emily Rapp. And "I Would Die If I Were You," and it's memoir, and then a bunch of prompts that work for her. And she's, I think, a New York Times bestseller. So I'm really curious about that, what that looks like.
Yeah. That's good. This turned into a little bit of I'm going treasure hunting, and it's making me think that. So I've had this list of somatic signaling writing prompts that have just literally been collecting, not collecting debts. I made them for a friend when she was going through like a creative transition in her business. But the prompts are, I should put them in, make them a part of the co-writing studio. Let me see if I can actually share my screen really quick, because this is something that I have found to be helpful. Is I'll take like a quote that like, sometimes quotes just kind of like pound you in your chest, like
Yeah.
it hits you. Um, well, I basically made this method for like taking a quote that I've gathered together and then doing a signal scan to see like how does the idea actually show up in your body? Like, does your body want to say something about it? And it takes some relaxation to learn how to let your body, uh, you know,
Respond.
respond. But it was really fun to make, and I made these a little while ago, and I've never gotten to share them outside of our friendship, and I feel like this is probably why. Um, Hold on. Let me see if I'm going to show you the Canva page. Just a second. It'd be nice to know if I could pull these in to make them.
Well, there you go. Good.
There we go. Can you
Oh,
see that?
yeah.
So I basically went through um, and pulled quotes from some of my favorite books and authors, and then made like a way for you to circle like if you feel any internal reaction, notice any reaction inside you. And then I wrote reflection prompts, like how to think about what this person is saying. So I'll read one right now because I feel like I just want to quote Thomas Merton in our conversation before we let folks go. He said, I like this one. No, the great business of our time is this, for one man to find himself in another who is on the other side of the world. Only by such contacts can there be peace. Can the sacredness of life be preserved and developed? Now, I read that and I get a chill down my left leg. Does it mean anything? I don't know, but I'm going to pay attention because the sacredness of self and this interweaving of the whole self with community means a lot to me right now. It means a lot. And so I like those moments because it seems like it helps. I use that card to help me think through, what do I want to say about the sacredness of self, for example. So I don't know, I might share those, might put those in as like a perk of the co-writing studio. If folks want to print them out, they can print them out or they can just look at them. But what I really like about our conversation today, Paulette, is it's all about like different modalities getting to interact. I feel like traditional writing, we were talking about this, like I'm a trained journalist. Journalists do not do this kind of research. We work in the world of facts and figures and organization, and that's a very important for journalists to work in the world of what they know, not what they're sensing. But boy, the world of sensing makes for really good like storytelling, right? When you move it out of the space that journalism needs to stay in. So thank you for sharing these some of these practices with us. And yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else you feel like we need to share about what we want people to know about letting story come through?
Well, one thing that that I do often is that I'm a real lover of the traditional main three Hindu goddesses.
Okay.
And Saraswati is known to be the goddess for creatives, artists, for writers. She's the goddess of wisdom and articulation and speech. And so they have longer chants, the goddesses have longer chants, but there's a short little chant that I often do. And I actually chanted it in my mind or out loud before we got on here. You know, she's about clarity and confidence. And so to be able to marry those two, you know, when we go to write, you know, can I be clear? And even in my teaching this morning, I chanted on my way, can I be clear? And can I show up in a way that instills confidence in the student or the reader, you know, that this person has done the work or whatever. And so I just love that. I love, because one of my teachers used to say, we're here to wear as many faces of the goddess as possible, man or woman. And, you know, however you identify. Yeah. So the chant is Om I'm Saraswati Namaha. And you just kind of put it on repeat and go off on your way, and then let it go, you know, and then offer it up. So it's all an offering, and it takes you sort of out of the equation a bit, less about me and more about what it is. Yeah,
absolutely. So, well, thank you for being with me. Thank you for everyone who showed up and went on this ride with us. This is how I feel about writing. I come up and I show up for the ride. Like the river kind of carries us, you know? So all this will be available in the replay. And I feel like this is going to turn into one of those like treasure chests of some of our favorite stuff to help unlock writing. So thanks for being here, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you in the co-writing studio and Because Life is Messy. So thanks, Paula.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Amanda. Such a joy.
Bye.